Okay, we're recording, and before I leave, I'll make you host, Erica. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Athena.
Hey,
Hi, Raphael. We are gonna give Meg a minute because she's taking care of something, and then we'll start the meeting. I will share the agenda items just while that's happening.
right. Great, thanks.
Hmm. Athena had posted this meeting as a 6:30 to 8:30, but I think in our conversation last meeting, we had wanted to go till 8. Does that sound
Yeah, that would work for me.
okay?
Yeah, I think that's what we said, hour and a half.
I think so too, and I think we intended it sort of like as a working meeting, given the kind of things that are on here.
Mhm. So are you waiting for Meg before you call to
I
order?
I was going to give her a minute, but I guess we can, we know she's here. She already
Yeah.
checked in with us, but
Yeah.
I can call the meeting to order. The outreach subcommittee, and it's Thursday, January 23rd, and I'll call a roll. Erica, I am here. Raphael,
Here.
and I'm gonna say Meg is here because she checked in with us just before we started recording. Um, Normally at this
I'm
time,
here.
great,
I'm
Meg.
here.
Thank you.
I'll give
Thank you.
15 more seconds, 10 more, few more
No,
seconds. Just
no problem.
very
We're just
much.
following the protocol.
thank you.
The next thing we might do is call for public comment, but I don't see anyone
Mhm.
other than us three here in this room.
Mhm.
So I'm going to skip right by that.
Yeah.
If we have someone join later, I'll maybe give an opportunity when that, if and when that happens. Okay. The first item was to review the list of potential publicity venues.
Mhm.
Meg, that was the piece of business that you were collecting, and you maybe wanted to give us an update on how that went, what you got, if anything, from the larger group. I'm just giving you a minute um to join. We have an item to edit the public input form, and I've set up hopefully a good way for us to start doing that.
Right.
Have a kind of like working session where we can visually take notes on some of the things that came in on the existing draft and things that we can add or revise on those questions.
Mhm.
We were going to talk about the interview protocols that Bernie presented and come up with some kind of standard protocol that we can disseminate among the whole group. We wanted to try to nail down some potential budget items. And that was our last major thing. So I'm just saying this out loud to kind of be conscious of the amount of time that we have. And Meg, I don't know if you heard earlier, I was saying to Raphael,
I did.
meeting was
Yeah.
posted until 8:30, but we're going to try to go till 8.
Yeah, I was going to
And I think
say,
that's what we had agreed on last time.
yeah, I was going to say that really works for me.
Okay.
And all three of us, we ought to be able to do that.
I have a lot of faith in us.
Yeah. So shall I jump in with my report?
That would be great. That's the first sort of official
Yeah.
thing here.
So I got comments from Julian and Bernie, which I incorporated into what I sent you. I've since then, I sent it out to, and I copied you, blind copied a large number of people I know personally, and I've started to get back very good feedback of some email lists. So the categories, I guess there's no one listening. Well, someone might want to watch the video.
Sure.
The categories were neighborhood email lists, and I know there are many more that I don't have, but I'm sure I'll get some. and standard outreach things like the Jones Library. They were all in the memo that not a memo, the outline that I sent you.
Mhm.
One of the questions is I've managed to find the names of all these incredible number of apartment buildings, and I don't know if it's worth. I have two opinions on this. Mostly it's students, and so we shouldn't try too hard. And there's so many, we don't know if the people who are in charge of emailing everybody in their apartment building would even want to do it. On the other hand, we've said we want to have robust outreach and find people who aren't who don't often participate in town affairs, and that would suggest that we should make that effort. So I wanted to get your opinion on that. I mean, some of those apartments buildings I hadn't heard of. There were what, 20 or so. But then there's some, so that's one question that I'd love to have your thoughts on. And I'm happy to continue working on that, see what comments I get back from the people I sent it to. I sent it to people in all parts of town. And for example, I heard back almost immediately from Jennifer Taub and Barbara Pearson, who live in the Lincoln Avenue, McClellan, Sunset area, and they have a very active email list, and she offered us access to that. They also suggested that she'd be happy to put it, Jennifer did, she's a counselor in her, Pam Rooney and her, and she do a District 4 update, and she said they'd be happy to put it in that. So made me realize we should get the counselors to all, when they have their district meetings, which they only have to have 2 a year, but whatever networks they have, I'm going to add that to the list, counselors outreach. So that's my report.
Okay.
Basically, I sent you the written thing I sent you is what I'm
Right.
working on.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there pieces? So you've raised a couple of good questions. Before we go to those, I wanted to ask you, from what you've compiled, what do you see as the kind of the holes in either geographically, demographically, like what are we potentially missing? Like in order to sort of focus our efforts on like where are we going to
Yeah.
recruit more
Yeah.
mailing or publicity options? What's missing right now from your perspective?
Okay. And Raphael, did you have something to say?
No, you could go ahead.
Okay. I forgot to say Ken LeBlanc also responded, and he actually gave me the link to all the Echo Hill, the two different, he gave me the link to directly communicate. Of course, I wouldn't do that if he didn't say it was okay, but I think so the big question is how hard do we want to try to get into the apartment buildings? Some of them, like Hobart, are mostly students. Maybe we want to distinguish some where we think, like I think at the Boulders, maybe more families live than some other places, but I don't know how to do that. So that's one question, is what to do about the many apartment buildings, some of which are huge complexes and some are just one building. In terms of outreach, I don't know. I can't decide. Again, I said I'm torn between, most of them are students. They're not going to respond versus we want to do robust outreach to reach everybody. So I know some people live, what I'm just remembering, I forgot, Riverside, near where I live. I'll add that to the list. I know people who live there who are definitely not students, or some faculty I know, foreign faculty live in some of those. So I don't know what to do about the apartment buildings. The areas
Okay.
that are missing are parts of town. In South Amherst, I only have Mount Holyoke Drive neighborhood. I think there must be more in South Amherst.
Yeah.
And that's a big missing area, I'd say.
Okay. Okay. Raphael, you had a comment, and then we'll come back to the missing pieces conversation.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Meg. It's great that you're doing some outreach to see what people have to offer.
Thank you. I didn't do any yet.
No, you're getting
Sorry.
feedback from folks. That's what
I will. Yeah.
So I think that's a good step. You raised a question about students. I think students are part of this charge. And I tend to think like, even if it's 5 students out of 50, it's worth it. It's
Yep.
tricky with assertions in terms of response rates. I don't know. I think our charge is to try to outreach to the community. And in
Mhm.
any way we can, and we hope. But I think
Mhm.
making those assertions initially about who and what the response might be is tricky. I think
Mhm.
we're trying to just be as ambitious as we can. And students
So
are,
that would suggest the Collegian and whatever the Amherst College newspaper is. Those are easy to get in. I've done that. I've never done Amherst. I'll add those to the list.
right?
There is also, Raphael, to your point, I think I would agree, and that this, in terms of considering the question of students, that they're part of the community. And I think that there's going to be a subset of those students that are from here,
Yeah.
even if it's small, that have lived in this town longer than the time that they arrived for their freshman year. Um, and also, I think that leads to a question about a sort of potentially a point of inquiry about how whoever's answering the survey, the form, the interview of like, how long have you lived here? Because there's an interesting perspective to be considered if someone just arrived versus if they have lived through the transition from a town meeting to a town charter and all the rest, a town council and all the rest of it. So might be something to consider in maybe the kind of the demographic portion of our questionnaire to include uh, some of that.
Mhm. Great. Let me ask you, I don't want to write, I was nervous about how far to go without the committee agreeing. Are you all okay if I write to the counselors and ask them what email lists they have? Or if they, with their outreaches, or if they're having a district meeting, or just, I can show you the draft email before I send it. It's suddenly occurring to me that they've all run for office. They probably have lists.
Yeah, they may. I don't No, I don't immediately see a problem with it if people have, assuming that their lists are well maintained and people have opted out or not included, you get into email spam uh, rules
But
and stuff.
is that okay if I write to them, or do you want to see the email before I send it? I
I
just want
am
to, go
I am
ahead.
okay with that. Raphael, do you have any?
I would say like you're definitely exploring your circles. The one element that I think we should be cautious about is those folks who have signed up for said list. I want to respect like who they expect to receive information from. That's a little bit tricky because
Mhm.
I just want to respect people sort of this list is for X, and here we are getting information from this group. It's hard
But
to sort of figure that out. Whoever's maintaining said list, hopefully they're respectful of that, but I just want to respect that.
yeah, but how about they send it? In other words, I'm exploring, would you be willing to use your list? I mean,
Okay.
they should. They're supposed to be supporting our process. I agree. I don't think I would write to those people. It's more writing to the counselors and asking, do you have, I mean, already Pam Rooney, I mean, Jennifer Taub wrote back and said she does, and I know Kathy Shane, I think she gave her whole list to the neighborhood association, but I don't know about the others like George Ryan and Alicia and so on. Just, so all I'm suggesting is that I write to the counselors and not ask if we can write to their list, but if they would be willing to send a message to their list.
Simple please share, you mean, with your, it could
Yeah,
be, or it could be in other ways.
okay, I'll just do that.
Makes
I
sense.
feel like we have to just start doing stuff.
I had
Yeah, but
two.
I would say like, yes, it's important to do stuff, but there's a window in terms of like what we're sharing. And to me, honestly, I think sharing that can you share with what we want to like get feedback about is crucially important. I think
Mhm.
you don't necessarily want to bombard folks with a plethora of emails. Here's what we want you to share. So that element of this process we need to be clear about.
Okay,
Make sense?
yep,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah,
I know with the donut, our District 1 Neighborhood Association, we have a process for approving stuff and we send everything out. We don't give our list. So I'm
Yeah.
sure others do as well.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to add two notes. Agree with everything Raphael just said. It makes me think about a similar effort or outreach to our state rep, Mindy Dom,
Hmm.
in her office, and what, if it has a different reach and a slightly different audience. And if that's a potential venue,
Yeah, good.
in the same way, right? Like not us emailing her people directly, but emailing her office.
Good
Mhm.
idea.
If we can go through them.
I
And
just
the
want
other
to be
thing
sure
is, I think,
I can still hear. I just want to be sure I turned off the stove. I'll be right back. I
Mhm.
just smell something that's worrisome.
I just turned
Okay.
it off.
On or off?
Off.
So sorry. My husband with COVID just turned it off. I could tell. Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry
good.
about that. We're dealing,
Alright.
we've got multiple things going on here. Just
The
the two of
second,
us.
yeah. The second thing I was gonna say is that with all of this outreach, I think it's gonna be important to keep really good track of who we've reached out to and when and with what. In other words, if we're gonna say, let's reach out to all the counselors, before we do that, there's this sort of agreement about what it is we're gonna say, as Raphael pointed out, what it is we're asking them to share. And when we've done that, so that we make sure we don't send multiple or confusing
Right.
communications or things out of sequence, or reminders when they're appropriate, and all of
Right.
that. So I think it's just a record keeping thing.
Okay, so this makes me, my proposal is that I would write a simple email that says, we're trying to do robust outreach. Would you be willing to send information about the charter review process to your lists? And not send them what it is we want. We don't know we haven't
I think
crafted
as
yet.
long as that part is clear,
Yeah,
that in a few weeks we will reach out to you with a sort of
Right.
out in an outreach campaign with a simple
right,
set of whatever that you can pass
Right.
along to your email list.
right. And so right for now, we're just creating to whom we will send those things. I'm happy to send you the draft before I send it to them if you'd like.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but I would say, Meg, something to think about. So you're asking those folks to share what we want to get out to the public. Why now? Why not wait until we have that material for them and say, please share?
Because
feel like-
we don't want to have to find out who has it, who doesn't. Like, does Alicia, who has a list and who doesn't, so that we just are ready to go. But I'm happy to wait. I just think.
But why wouldn't they? And I'm not saying to do it differently. I just think in terms of efficiency and sort of, I say, respectful communication. Perhaps it's your folks, you know them, but I would say like those folks could also share in that same email that you send out that has the information. You share it with your networks. And if you have others that you could share, other places that you could share, let me know. So it's for us to try to be a little more efficient. I know you want to move quickly.
No, but it won't be as efficient if they tell us other networks 3 weeks or 4 weeks from now, and then we have to send it again. I'll do that though. It's fine. I just want to know everybody we want to send it to, so when we're ready, we just send it. But I'll wait if you feel more comfortable.
I don't know how Erica feels about it, but I think
I
like
think-
that one correspondence, you send it, share with your networks. If you feel like you have other networks that we should send it to, it bounces back to us. That person does the extra step, and then we just send it to that group too. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
it'll take a week or two to get the second tier out, but that's okay. Whatever. What do you think, Erica?
My point, my feeling is that, just in my experience with simplifying the ask is the best sort of standard for communication. In other words, when we have if we could get all our materials and as many addresses as possible ready and do it at once,
Right.
it's better for everybody. If we're doing a two-step process, it's I don't think there's anything bad about it, except that it's slightly more blurrier what we're actually asking. So I don't see a reason to I don't see a reason to do it twice unless we really have to. I understand that if we may hear back from some people that they don't have a proper list and we'll have to find it some other way. But then we can build out a second wave of communication some other way.
Okay.
And I
But
think, yeah,
all right.
that's what
So
I
I
think.
won't contact the counselors, but I've already did contact a couple that I know. And
Yeah.
I heard back from Jennifer Taub immediately with this long. So what it means is we'll say, here's some material we'd like to send to your list. And then we'll say, do you have suggestions of other lists that you may know of in your neighborhoods? And then we'll send it out like 2 or 3 weeks later, a second set. So we're talking about 2 months from now, probably. But that's okay.
I mean, I don't think it'll take us necessarily 2 or 3 weeks to turn it around if we get, depending
Okay.
what we hear back. I mean, it may be, and things might have to go in waves. I'm
Okay.
comfortable with that, but
But I'm going to continue to get the neighborhood lists, not
yeah,
the lists, but I mean, I think there are 20 or 25 of them
Yeah.
in this town of people who have lists. Maybe you know of, maybe your neighborhoods. Where do you live? Both of you? I don't even know.
I am in South Amherst, and I'm sorry that I didn't get you a contact person. There's a South Amherst neighbors.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I don't know
Okay,
how
so
active they are, but yeah.
well, it doesn't matter. It's and Raphael, where do you live?
Yeah, I'm also in South Amherst.
Oh, good.
But
So,
here's the thing, Meg. I certainly you have your connections and those folks might respond and be helpful. I just mean for those folks that we aren't connected to in that way, friends, I'd rather be like respectful of their time and clear.
okay, so the counselors then are in which category? The category we want to just send them one. I think we've discussed it. I'll wait to contact them, even though I've already reached out to
I
a
think for
couple.
the ones that you've already done, like a friendly outreach because you have some connection, that's not a problem. I think what we're saying is let's
Okay,
for the ones that we don't have a connection to, let's wait and sort of build a full communication setup
okay,
and make one big push with one clear ask all at once.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll accept that. I think a benefit of contacting, well, I'm gonna let go, it's good for them to see we're doing something, but I'll wait. I won't contact. I mean, I think I know most of them already, but I'm not gonna do that. I'll work on the neighborhood
Just to
list.
say, I share your priority of wanting to start moving things out the door so that with some
Yeah.
urgency. But I think there's also an advantage to kind of flooding the zone when we've got it all together, when we've got
Okay,
our
okay,
questionnaire is
fine.
ready and
Yep,
all the public input is ready and yeah.
great.
Um,
And I'll say I didn't sit with it yet and think about like not only folks that we know, but public facing orgs that could help. I think I'll sit with it. Hopefully other people do the same. So we have a robust list that goes beyond like our circle, which matters much. But I think as we work on that, we're working on the materials to get out there and we make a push. I think it could happen soon with as long
Okay,
as list as we can.
yeah. So look at the list I sent you because that ought to trigger. I mean, I've got,
I'm looking at it now.
yeah,
Yeah, you have
if
quite a few things on here.
but I didn't have enough connections with, I need to find out if the Survival Center has a list. I don't know if they're BIPOC lists. I know some people I can ask though.
Yeah, so
Um,
there's work to be done, Meg. You have church and mosque and temple networks. To me, it's like we could sit and do the work in terms of which church. There are many in this town. Who's
right,
contacting and doing that sort of work to get contact information of
right.
individuals is important.
Yeah, so for me to get contact information just for the people I listed, I
Yeah.
know someone who goes to the mosque, for example. I can call her and ask, how do just so we have the names. I mean, she's a friend,
Yeah.
but that's a lot of calls for
But
me
I
to
don't
do.
think like maybe that'll be your approach in terms of mining your network that closely. But I think you could simply go to Church X and see who the contact folks are. It's just the
Right, but
time.
okay, right, I'll do that instead of calling them. Yeah, go to the church and say, and right, I just want to have a list so that when
Yeah,
we're ready, we're ready.
yeah.
Good.
I would say I
Okay,
don't know
great.
how Erica feels about it. You've done a lot of great work here, but we could also contribute to said list as
Okay,
we
great.
go to work
Yeah,
on In the material.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Um,
Okay, I'll keep working on it and
it's a great start, and I think it's um it's necessary work, but it's also important, and kind of in building a map, a conceptual map of how we understand
yeah.
the constituent parts of this community that we're doing outreach to. So thank you for all the
Okay.
work.
And so should I send it after a couple of days and I work on it some more to the whole committee for the meeting next week? Why don't we at the end of this meeting decide what we want to send them, if anything?
Yeah, I think given what we're describing here, I think, and I know that you didn't get much response from people, that I think after tonight's meeting, I can write to Julian to sort of, pass on, and or to Athena or whatever, so it gets passed on to the rest of the large committee to like push people again
Okay.
to share any ideas, personal contacts, like personal emails that people that could help us
Okay.
move this along. So we can
And
make another push.
Yeah,
before
and
next-
I'll send you an updated version tomorrow because I've added some things
Great.
from what I've heard.
Okay, great.
Great. Thank you, Erica and
Thank you
Raphael.
both.
It looks like you're working you're using Google Docs for this. I think you are.
I just made a word list. I need to put it in
Okay.
Google Docs.
I thought I saw it. Okay. All right. Thanks.
I need to put it in some form where they have categories and I can
Okay.
click on the emails.
I'm never clear if we have a Google Doc, excuse me, if sharing it with everyone and having everyone contribute to the same document is somehow problematic. There was something about the way that we did it, the form that I had set up, that avoided the problem of the open meeting restriction on
Oh,
work outside of, because all of you were contributing your ideas, but not seeing the other
yeah.
contributions. And so Google Doc kind of can't do that. We'd all be
Yeah.
piling into the same list, which is against the rule.
Yeah.
So
I sent if people only respond just to me,
yeah,
I can add those things one by one.
that's
It's hard to believe that contributing contact ideas is deliberation, but oh well.
yeah. Okay. Anything that we need to add on this agenda item?
Yeah.
All
I think
set.
we've got good momentum going, which is
Awesome.
very exciting. Okay, the next item was the editing on the public input form. I think we had talked about kind of allotting a chunk of time here to have like a work session to work on
Yeah.
this together. Which I'm 100% up for if you are. What I've done is taken the draft questions that had appeared on Julian's first run at this, and put them in a format that we can keep, revise, remove, and then add whatever we want to add. So this won't be the last pass, but we could do a first pass
Yeah.
on doing that if you're it's just one way to go about it, but I was trying to sort of systematize a little bit.
Do you have it to share on the screen?
I'm going to share it on the screen right now.
Okay. Should we make general comments first before we go through?
I think we made enough general comments on
Okay,
the draft in the big meeting, which is
Yeah.
there was an appreciation of the effort and an acknowledgement that it needed a lot of work, and we delegated it to this committee
Yeah.
to
Okay.
do the editing, the live
Yeah.
editing work, which is hard to do with 9 people. So here we go.
Yeah, but I didn't say this at the meeting, but I think it needs, I'll emphasize a lot of work.
Okay.
Um,
Are you
like
all
the first,
seeing this?
yep, thank you.
Okay. So what I've done is I've taken all of the questions except for the demographic ones, which we can talk about later. I've taken all of the questions that appeared on that form. Each one is in a line here, and I put the kind of the type of question that it was sort of set up to be, right? There's survey questions, there's sort of multiple choice questions, there's yes, no questions, there's the Likert scale, there's the one where it goes from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And we can comment here. Like I said, we can decide to keep this question, revise this question, remove it, or add something later. We can add new things.
Right.
So my idea is that we do some work on this, and right now I think there's 13 of them existing. We can do some work on what's here and bring those and whatever additions we want to make to those 13 to next week's committee meeting. So
So-
that hopefully we
Good.
start to catch the things that have fallen through the gaps that aren't captured by these questions, or that we want to capture in a slightly more subtle way, or what more nuance, or whatever we're feeling about this set of questions. So, but just keep in mind, we don't only need to respond to these questions.
Right.
We can add.
So, yep. So what do you think? So, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I'm looking at them closely.
Yeah. Is that better?
Yeah. No, I can see fine.
Okay.
So could I say,
Yeah.
it's obviously there's going to be some introduction that explains why we're doing this. I wonder if we should start with something to find out so that we can interpret their answers, not something so huge as that first question, but what is your experience interacting with the town? I don't know how to ask it, but this to me, that especially if it's the first question, it's too big, it's too general. It's too, I think people would look at that and say, oh, I don't know where to, either I don't have any idea of what the town government is, or I don't, we need to start with something less general and difficult to answer. I mean, I don't know how I would answer that question.
You're talking
I
about
don't-
this question here.
This first question,
Yeah.
it's too much, and I could write a 5-page answer to it, but that's not what we want. So I think it might be interesting to start with, what is your experience with the town government, how the town is governed? So they may say, I don't have any, I don't know, I don't like starting with that one. It's just, we need to get,
Okay.
that's my first opinion.
So let me just back up a second. Raphael, are you good with this process? Do you want to go through these?
I am, but my read on what you're asking us to do is we're just seeing if these questions work for for what we're trying, if these questions work for us. We're not necessarily talking about design yet in terms of order.
Right.
So to me, like this question, we're just deciding whether or not we keep it or not, revise it or not, or get rid.
Right. Okay.
That's
Am
right.
I understanding this process correctly?
Yeah, as our first pass is like, do we keep it? Do we reject it? Do we edit it?
Yeah.
And if we're going to edit it, what are our we're not going to edit it live here. We're going to make a recommendation that we bring back to the committee, because this is like a document on the table that somebody put together, and we're not throwing it out wholesale. We're going to make a response to it, basically.
Right.
So I understood. So I would say, like, my sort of thoughts about this question. I think an open-ended question like this is fine. I don't know about order, but it would be good to have people's sense of their experience with Amherst government. The changes element, I'm not sure yet, but the beginning part of this would be good to get some insights about experience with Amherst government. I think the change element could be in play too, but I'm just not sure how to phrase it.
Okay. I think the consensus being it needs revision.
Yep. What the other
Um,
thing that isn't going to, just another topic that we won't get to if we go top question by question, is, do we want categories of questions? So this one has things about the council here and there scattered, and then things about the budget process scattered here and there. It seems like we might want to pull things out by category. So if you say,
Yeah.
should an individual counselor be allowed to postpone a vote without discussion? People need to know that, in fact, that's allowed in the charter, I think, once in a meeting.
Right.
That's very specific compared
It's
with the
very
first one.
specific. So
Very
here's
yeah.
what I want to say. I think we could all come up with what we think are specific, like those kinds of specific questions that are for responding to some specific thing that appears in the charter. So I feel like what we should do is take maybe 10 minutes of our time to review these.
Okay,
And it's just assess for like what we should do with these questions, and then spend
Good.
time adding what we think, or like either shaping some of our own questions or editing with more nuance what these questions are. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
So what I heard for the first question is it requires a revision. It possibly could work as an open-ended, maybe in a different sequence. I also think we could, for instance, say these need to be split into two different questions if they're going to be
Yes.
open-ended, because they're substantial.
good.
And they're almost like a question you'd see at the end of a survey. Is there anything else you want to tell us? So
Exactly.
So
Exactly. You nailed it. Excellent.
we can add to that if I didn't capture it. I also have a column for like if we have a specific note that it shouldn't be open-ended, it should be multiple choice, or vice versa, that kind of thing. We can add a note.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just breeze if we can a little bit. Are you currently satisfied with Amherst government as a yes or no question?
That should be it. Go ahead.
You go ahead, man.
If anything, it should be a scale at the Likert, but I'm not sure if it's too general for the beginning, but it should be a Likert, but without an explanation. It's not, I'm not sure it's helpful because the next question doesn't follow it.
Okay. Raphael?
Yeah, I was going to say on a Likert scale for this question, but I like it.
Okay. So it sounds like a revision.
Mm-hmm.
This third one. Town elections are accessible and information is readily available as a Likert scale, which is set
Sure.
up, again, strongly disagree all the way through, strongly agree.
Yep. And now I think we could have a set of questions about elections, but that's not here. But there are a couple of other questions that'd be interesting to ask about elections. But let's just do what you said. Go through 10 minutes on this list.
Yeah. Town elections are accessible and information is readily available. I think to me, there's questions about what do you mean by accessible?
Yeah.
And information. What is meant by those things? So I think to me,
Yeah. Good.
I think it's a worthy topic, but I'm not sure that I think to my mind, it needs a revision.
I agree. I agree.
I'm in agreement too.
Okay.
And maybe put with other questions about elections.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Are there enough choices or,
Yeah.
I don't know how we get at the problem that some of the council races have not been competitive, but that's another whole thing.
Well, here's a broader question that we don't need to answer right now, but this kind of thing is a sort of strategy for a survey, like where you make a statement and then ask somebody to, rate how true they think it is. It can come across loaded depending on how you do
Yeah.
it. It can come across like a preloaded opinion. And it takes
Right.
a little more delicate hand. That's just a side note. Because
I
we can come
agree.
up with a lot of blanket statements like this for people to respond to, but it might sort of like show the hand of the committee that we feel this is a problem area, don't you?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think I don't know if I should say this to Julian, but I think this whole form has a bit of that here and there. It's
Right.
Julian, yeah.
Let me just make this a little bit bigger. This question here,
That's sort of loaded. Also, how do people know? That has to do with the relationship and high quality education, two different topics at a time when we're cutting the school budget. So it's it's complicated.
no. I would um, I would remove this because it's too, I think, too complex an issue to address in a
Yeah.
single question like this, even as a rating. Um,
Yeah.
not that the issues in there aren't worth addressing, but that I don't think that
Yeah, I agree with you.
there's a
And it
lot of
should be,
complexity, yeah.
and there are other questions about the school. This should be with questions about the schools. For example, the 2-year terms, the budget process is very controversial.
Yeah, well, the
And-
grouping, I totally agree with you. We could have election-related questions and school
Yeah.
and budget-related questions. They can be sort of groupings we can do.
Yeah,
But Raphael, do you
We're
have
just-
thoughts on this one
I'm in agreement to remove.
to remove?
Yeah.
Meg, is that,
yeah, totally.
okay.
Good.
Should an individual town council be allowed to postpone a vote without discussion?
It needs context. The context is the charter says this. And it's controversial. I don't know how you,
Hmm. I think my challenge is this survey is designed. There are many things that you could choose from the charter to focus on in this survey.
yep,
How do we determine what's the focus? And
I
that's the
agree.
challenge that I think we might have moving forward. Because there's a lot of specific things that you could perhaps cherry pick and focus on in said survey, but we'll have to have clarity about what's the focus, what will we focus on? And
Mhm,
these questions give me pause.
mhm. We could have a section on the charter. In other words, say some questions that would require a charter change and some questions that are just about,
Yeah,
that don't.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So in terms of keep or revise,
Yeah. I hear you. I heard your comment, right? I heard that it's but it's not that necessarily, to my mind, it's not that necessarily this is an incorrect issue to address, but that
Right,
by reaching into the barrel and pulling out this one and not the 7 others
yeah.
that have to do
Right.
with what town councilors are empowered to do, it sort of already predetermines some
Yeah.
Right.
notions about what town council is. And
And
so,
it shapes what we focus on in said report.
right,
So it's something that we have to be cognizant and cautious about.
right. And
I
it's,
think
it-
in said survey, you want to attend perhaps to different parts of the charter. But how much specificity we'll have to figure out, because you could have
Right.
a really long survey if you're asking questions like these for each area.
right.
I mean, this is another question that reflects the opinion of the person who drafted it, which is fine.
Makes sense.
It's just, as you said, you're reaching into the barrel and pulling out one thing that. So should we just keep going as our plan and then see where we are? I like that
Yeah.
proposal, Erica.
Yes, and I think generally we're saying it needs a revision. We haven't decided what exactly, but okay.
Good. Excellent.
6, should municipal employees, including school department and library employees, be permitted to run for town elected office?
This is a charter one again.
Yeah.
It strikes me that some of the questions, the way that they're framed or phrased, go towards almost as if they were like a referendum.
Right.
Like if we
Exactly.
opened up certain parts of the charter for a public vote, how would it come out? And I'm not sure that, in some ways, yes and no questions really simplify things. And in another way, it is sort of reductive in a way that
Right.
isn't useful, right? For making recommendations about how to actually
Mhm.
improve the charter. So sometimes when I see like, well, that's an interesting issue, but is asking this question to, 1,000 people, let's say, that we get responses from, is it going to help us make a recommendation? Or is it just gonna say 700 people don't like it and 300 people do like it, which is like a referendum, is what I mean.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. And context would help, the charter limits, people who, in order, at least the reason why it's there. Because it sounds, somebody who does this quickly would say, yeah, of course they should. And I actually don't know what I think about it, but we want to be sure that we're not asking question in a way that makes the answers, doesn't give people a chance to really think.
Yeah.
So revision,
Yeah,
you're typing, I'm going to see how badly I burned the Swiss chart. Not bad.
if I'm not capturing something in the notes, please, I'm trying to sort of summarize our comments.
Mhm.
Would you like to see more areas for residents to direct where taxpayer funds are spent and how budgets are created?
Mhm. So then the question is, do we want to use the word direct? Which this is a reference to participatory budgeting, I think. Or do we want to say participate, or do we want to say be more informed about or understand? I don't know. The word direct is hard, but, it's, what does that mean? Because
Yeah,
the budget process is very complicated, and there's a lot of controversy about the school budgets that the town, some people think the town has too much control, but this is so general.
yeah. Raphael, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just struggling with the specificity versus I think survey design is tricky.
It
And I
is.
think
Yeah.
someone referenced perhaps getting some support. Um, I think we could definitely go through this process in terms of revision, but I worry in terms of, I circle back to the cherry picking question. But I think for me, it would be revision here, in terms of, yeah, I'm just still thinking about approach, to be honest,
Yeah,
like how specific. Um, and getting some guidance around like making sure all elements of said charters tapped, touched on. I don't know how you would approach that. I just worry about like us designing a survey that leans in one direction as opposed to capturing. So I'm caught in that. And I've been thinking about that for a while.
I agree, Raphael, and that in the email I sent to the whole committee, the larger committee, I asked, does anybody have ideas of people who are knowledgeable about surveys? And nobody responded to that, but there are people who
Yeah, this is
who
what they,
are professional survey creators. There must be some in this town,
yeah,
but
yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm struggling with right now, to be honest.
Yeah.
well, should we keep going just to,
Yeah, we should.
yeah. I think we're uncovering some things that we have to figure out, though. Like, this is so general. And the question is it proposals or is the budget responsible and equitable, or, to me, this is too broad. What about the-
Let's finish going through these, and then I think what's emerging is that we have some thoughts, I think, on those broader categories.
Yeah, good.
Broad categories of questions, even if we can just bring them as
Yeah.
a proposal for the large committee.
Mhm.
And to figure out how the work can be done.
Yeah.
I'm just writing down the categories that have come up so far.
Yeah, that's great. Some of them will match up to the sections of the charter, and that sort of summary breakdown that Andy prepared might be useful.
Yeah.
They might match up and they might not, right? We don't have to stick to a table of contents approach, but some of that
Right.
may be useful kind of categorically, but this is another Likert scale one. Since the change from town meeting, the town government has been more responsive to the concerns and needs of residents.
Too broad.
Hmm.
I don't know. That's what I think.
I think I would remove.
Remove.
Yeah.
Me too. It's sort of loaded.
One of the things that I was responding to in this question is kind of what I was implying earlier, which is it suggests that everyone we're asking has a perspective on the before versus the after, where many people did not live here
Yeah.
before, or
Yeah.
maybe weren't of age to participate or have a long perspective. And so we might be just excluding by the nature of the question.
And also, there are a lot of residents.
Yeah. The Amherst Town Council is demographically representative of the residents.
Well, this is really interesting because the first council had, I think, 12 women and 1 man. There's more balance now, but
Is
every
this a
2 years there's
question- Is this a question that we want to put in a survey?
No.
no.
I think
Delete.
what demographic element are you focused on? I
Yeah.
think for me.
Do you believe the executive branch? This was a question that was set up as not a Likert scale, but a kind of multiple choice. It was a question about the authority and scope of authority that the town manager has. And it was sort of like too much, the right amount, or not enough, that kind of scale. I think if we were to include it, I think it would need a revision that has to do with some nuance, because the town manager is involved in a lot of different issues, and so one might feel that the town manager has the right amount of authority when it comes to X and not enough when it comes to Y.
Mhm.
Right.
That's my opinion, but
I agree. I'm putting it down in our categories as the balance between the executive and legislative branches.
yeah.
I've got five categories so far. Well, let's keep going. This is good.
Do I need to put a note on that? Let's see. It needs more.
Yeah, specificity or detail. Yeah, good.
Is the current process for resident petitions easy and accessible? Again,
Well, nobody's ever done one, so. Sorry.
So remove Meg, what,
Either remove or there needs to be something explaining it. I don't think there's ever been one. I may be wrong. Because it's not easy. Or this could be under the charter section if we have such a section. Or participation, under a participation section, actually.
I'm gonna put a revise on it.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Finally, do you believe 13 town councilors is representative of the town? If not, would you like to see more or less council seats?
So the word should be fewer,
Yeah,
but that's one of my little previous English teacher pet peeves, fewer versus less. But anyway, most people don't get that right. That's okay.
it's in the vein is of something that we should be inquiring about, which is the size and shape.
Mhm.
Sort of, cyclical duration of the town council, terms and term limits and all of that kind of thing.
Right.
I think it needs to be sort of broken apart and more thoughtfully.
yeah. It's revised.
All right. So I feel good that we've given each of these a serious consideration and a thoughtful response. I would like to bring our thoughts to the larger committee. We don't have to do this again with the larger committee, but I feel like we've given it the due diligence as and used it as a way to start thinking about categories, formats, approaches, as Raphael said, right? Like, what is it? And also I'm thinking about how do we ask the questions that we need in order to prepare a solid evidence-based report at the end, like starting sort of going backwards from what we need to finish this process with, like what is the survey instrument that we need to create that gets us the content to make the report.
Right.
So
I'd say for me, like getting some support around folks that have done surveys like these would be helpful. I think there's an element in play in terms of attending to all of these elements in this charter, these 10 articles. Like, how do we perhaps attend to each of those areas in a survey? Some advice. So I think there's some general questions that I would think helpful to this process. Stuff like, have you read the charter? Have you been involved? Like questions like those, I think I'm comfortable with handling, but it's more about the scope of this work in terms of the charter as a whole. How do folks approach it when it comes to survey?
Yeah. So I came up with 6 categories that we might want to organize these things into categories.
Mhm.
And we can come back with, so just to pause for 1 second, Meg. So we will, in terms of what we're bringing back to our larger group,
Mhm.
one is a review of the existing draft.
Mhm.
Two is a real consideration of what kind of support can we seek out to help us design a good solid survey that addresses many different parts of the charter for the purposes of, again, writing a good report.
Yeah.
And third, Meg, here are some broad categories that we see kind of emerging from the conversation that we're engaged in.
Right. And that we think organizing the questions in categories would be more, so that you could develop them, you know, it could start with something and move toward more simple towards. So they are the council, so size, representative, the terms, the balance between the executive and the legislative branches. I won't keep repeating what all the questions that related to those, but it's sort of the budget process, which is follows from the relationship between the executive and the legislative. Elections, that might come earlier. I'm not sure the right order of these. Fifth is participation, which would deal with the resident petition, the attending, do they attend district meetings? Do they have access to information, participatory budgeting, a set of questions that are on that. And then there may be some questions about the charter itself. I'm not sure there are any questions about the charter that aren't covered in those other 5 topics, but it seems to me the questions
What was
might
the
be
first one?
better. The first one was the council, the size, the representative, terms. And is it reflective of, you know, is it representative of the, I just wrote the word representative, but the question that was on the survey was, is it representative of the population? I'm not sure, we want to rephrase those, but I think these 5 or 6 categories would help us develop questions in a way that's kind of sequential, so that people go through understanding. I mean, I'm assuming everybody agrees that meaningful, robust participation is a good thing as long as it's not cumbersome. And so how's that going? Do people know what's going on? Do they know how to get an issue, bring an issue? I don't know which questions, but do you know how to bring an agenda item to a council meeting? Or do you, I'm not sure what questions we want to ask, but
Yeah.
I think those 5 or 6 categories are kind of capture what's we've been discussing.
Mhm.
I could type this up and send it to you if you
Yeah,
want.
I wrote the rough idea, but
Okay,
I have the feeling that those are solid, the ones you wrote down and just outlined, and that there will probably be more. If we were
Yeah.
to discuss this for another half hour, we'd come up with 6 more, which would be valid, right?
yeah.
And rounded and sort of deep questions to get into. So I'm sort of torn between how to proceed with the work. There's the idea of getting some expertise and some outside support for somebody who has a lot of experience doing surveys. But I have the idea that it would be interesting to meet that person or that entity in the middle with some pre-work about what
Right.
we perceive some of the large questions or large categories even to be. Not to make work for us, but to sort of.
Right.
And so the question for me right now, in this, you know, this moment at this time in this meeting, is how to proceed with the work. Like, is this a
Right.
job for, we've done a piece of work on the survey, the draft of the survey and a review, and that kind of like raise some alarms and some serious issues for us. Is this a piece of work now for this committee, this subcommittee to proceed with, or is this something to bring to the larger group? Because we have to.
Yeah, my suggestion is to bring what we just did to the larger group, but also to say these questions could be organized in categories, so that instead of, to me, they hopscotch all around. That's all. And say some of the categories might be these things. I'm not sure there are too many more categories than these, but maybe there are. But I'm just suggesting that the questions be organized differently, which we haven't addressed because we just looked at each question.
Yeah.
But to me, when I read this the first time, it was just sort of all over the place. I wouldn't know how to answer it.
Yeah.
But I think it's great that Julian took a shot. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
we're working towards getting some consultants. It would
Yep.
be great to hear from them what public outreach sort of survey approach has been. I think we could perhaps organize it in terms of what are our priorities, but there are different parts of the charter. Some people might be interested in the legislative branch, other people might be interested in elections. For me, someone who has some expertise in terms of doing this work could give us some guidance around attending to all of these elements in a survey approach. I think this committee, with some guidance, could help with the outreach elements. Who is this going to? We have this survey created. We got some guidance. So I think in terms of moving forward, that guidance is key. But I also think beyond the survey, we talked about like some visual mechanism that could help or be a part of this process. I think that's a part of our work too. I don't know
Yeah.
if trying to get someone to help us with that, but I think preparing these materials with some support to me would be ideal. Graphic designer, survey expert, quickly. And then we're just seeing who we're going to get this stuff out to. And then once
Yep.
those materials are produced for us, getting some support around that, we tighten it up and make it happen. I just worry like without experience, expertise, it's just missed opportunities. And
Mhm.
some charter commissions, I'm not sure we did this, but they actually begin with like some guidelines around like some best practices. And one of the things they say is be thoughtful about your survey distribution. Some actually just begin with like beyond that survey, which can be guiding or leading. And it seems like that's what's in play for what
Right.
we've looked at thus far. Some people have other public outreach mechanisms in terms of, yes, I'm sending out the survey, but here's this space where share your thoughts and concerns about, you lead us. And there's a holding spot for that. So
Yeah.
beyond the survey, there could be other public outreach that's less controlled by us.
Mhm.
We're doing this work, we want to hear from you about the charter. There's some people who probably know a ton about it. Those people could give you like specific sort of areas that they want to lean into. So I think you want to offer that too. But the survey, I think we don't want to lose an opportunity to like get as much as we can.
Mhm.
So I'd rather like not slow down totally, but just
Yeah.
get an expert in play to help. And
Yeah.
not only an expert in terms of survey design, I've designed surveys, but someone who's gone through our charter process and could help with like thoughtfulness about getting as much as we can.
So to that end is, I don't know enough about them, maybe one of you do, the Collins Center, is this something that we kind of add to that scope of work?
We could explore that.
If you look
I
at
think
what
that's a
their,
good,
if
but
you look at what their offerings are, they say they help with this work.
right.
Yeah.
I think that's where we should start.
Okay.
But it seems to me, I don't think, I'm agreeing with you, Raphael. I don't think this is a but. I'm going to say, and when we give our report to the larger committee, if we only give our answers to those things like revise, delete, I feel strongly that we've also had consensus that these things need to be organized in categories.
Yeah.
So I would suggest we don't have to read these categories, but to me, when I read this the first time, I was like, whoa, this is so disorganized. And most people don't know that much about the town government. So the survey ought to be something that helps people understand. The questions ought to be asked in a way that people learn something. So I just think the simple thing is they need to be in categories.
Okay.
So people taking through, an issue.
So just to review, what we're going to report out on this topic so that we can move on to another thing
Yeah.
is that we reviewed the existing draft. We came to some consensus that much of it would need revision and that it would be better organized into categories that largely follow some of the categories that already exist in the charter. We'll just leave it at that. And
Yep.
then second point, we recognize the need for expertise and that maybe we go
Good.
to add to the Collins Center scope of work, the idea of a survey, survey design, with our close input or conversation with them. And thirdly, we have some ideas of broad categories, but we're leaving that part of it open for further conversation.
Good.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Glad we did that piece of work. I realize that it's really difficult to create things, right? Like, it's really challenging we can have amazing and productive conversations, and it's very challenging to produce something at the end, right? Like, we have actions that kind of lead us off into additional actions. We haven't necessarily produced the thing, but we
Mhm,
have like a sequence of actions to take.
mhm.
Okay, the next thing we were going to talk about is the town officials' interview protocols, which got delegated to this subcommittee to revise and somehow standardize. This was just to review the proposal that Bernie had put together about that had broken out the list of elected officials, for example, and has sort of assigned them to each one of us as committee members to proceed with interviewing people. And there was a question about, well, there were a series of questions about this having to do with should we, like, to what extent should we standardize the questions? To what extent should we aim to do the interviews in a similar format, meaning on Zoom, in person, across the table? I mean, I don't know, there's so many different ways it could be done. And should we entertain the idea of doing written response sort of interviews? Should each committee member be responsible for filling out a form transcribing what responses came in? So all of that's the
related
set of questions we're talking about here.
And related was, I don't know if I said this or just thought it, do we show the person who was interviewed our notes to see if they're accurate, which would be a big drag, but if, I don't know what I think about it. Maybe we don't even want to mention that because it would be so much work. But
yeah.
Well, I think, should we start talking about it, or what do you all think?
Yeah, I broke out, just for the sake of conversation, I broke out Bernie's notes into a page about, like, he had outlined some questions for counselors and some questions for other kinds of officials. But I think before we get into the questions, if we could have a conversation about format.
Yeah.
So my feeling is that they should be in person or on Zoom. So not in email exchange or phone call. That's one thing.
And rationale for that, Meg?
Pardon?
The why behind that?
I think it's more personal. I think you're more likely to be able to ask follow-up questions or see how they say it, or if they pause a lot. I just think it's more, or to make it optional, but it shouldn't be typed answers, seems to me. It's much harder to ask a follow-up question. So my opinion is it should be, if possible, if people don't want to do it in person or on Zoom, I guess we could say a fallback could be a telephone call or handwritten, but I think a personal interview is more likely to get thoughtful answers. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, Raphael, your thoughts?
So your beginning questions about standardization, I say yes. I would also say it's good to have these interviews documented. If we're using said interviews to write a report, it's good for all members to have a sense of what's been shared by these folks.
Mhm.
So having access to that is important. And I also think it's good to have a record of it. And I
So,
think in terms of like respecting those who are part of this, like even though it's more time consuming, like the fact checking with these folks, I think is
Yeah.
important. So more time consuming, but I would say standardized, documented, and perhaps shared. We're building a report on this. This is some of the data or information we're collecting. So I think that's, to me, like transparency, clarity,
Mhm.
key here.
okay, so what I just heard you say is yes to standardizing it, meaning we agree on a set of standard protocols for how we're doing them. We agree on a form of documentation that's acceptable,
Mhm.
and we agree that we're gonna share the notes or what we heard with
Yeah,
interviewees for accuracy.
yeah.
Do you agree, Erica?
I do agree. I think it's, and I also agree with what you were saying, Meg, about in person or on Zoom is going to be the best way to get to these values. I think if we do written answers, we're going to kind of,
It's turning on a light.
I think we're going to lose some.
Nuance.
I think we might, not sure.
Mhm.
I know, like, I'm not an ethnographer, so I think, like, in many ways, I think in terms of these former or previous elected folks, for me, it's good for them to have some lead time in terms of questions. I think
Yeah.
we could be thoughtful about how we, if folks want to interview, they can, but I think we should have a clear sense of how we're documenting what's shared. Like, I think it's tricky for us to take notes, and that's hard to do. So I think like grappling with how we collect information from these folks accurately is really important.
Mhm. So I want to ask
So-
you, I didn't understand, Ralph. Did you say it's hard to take handwritten notes or typed notes?
I-
But how do you document it if you don't do that?
I think people record, people send questions in advance. There are lots of different ways. And again, like this is some work that I do, but I just know like handwritten notes are tricky for folks these days. Folks are recording things.
So-
It's just tough. Maybe
So
you're
how
good
would
at
you
it,
report, how would
but
you write, how would you, I don't understand. How would you write the report if you didn't take any notes?
so you record and transcribe.
Oh,
Yeah, so you have a recording device. You let folks know it's going to be recorded. And then we take on the charge of transcribing said
wow.
record. And some people appreciate that in terms of accuracy. But folks will decide in this group the direction they want to go in. But that mechanism in place is just helpful in terms of accuracy.
But so I'm just find it daunting to type down every word they say. Let me ask you, would it be something that could be optional? And if so,
Yeah.
then you show them what your notes are so they can correct them?
Yeah, they're just tools that you could use that you don't have, like transcription, they're tools you could use that are quick.
Right, but
So-
somebody might sort of get distracted and talk about their broken washing machine or, I don't know. I just think transcribing every single thing they say might be,
No,
I
no,
don't know.
so
Hold
some
on, hold on.
processes go ahead.
I think Raphael is saying use a technological tool to transcribe what was said in a recorded conversation like this, which
Uh-huh.
is great, but it doesn't work for an in-person interview. So does that mean that we're asking for a Zoom standard format so that things can be recorded and then transcribed?
Yeah.
because I get what you're saying, Raphael, which is if we have a transcript, then we can we have the best possible record for the report, and also we can share it with the interviewees and say, does this capture the sentiment you were trying to get across? There's something to refer to.
And I just know, like, being on the other end of like this in play for me, like the transcript shared, do you want to they fact check? And some things, Meg, are removed. So if you're talking about the cat and the whatever, that's not a part of the record. You just remove it.
How you burnt the Swiss chard.
Yeah, you take it out. Take it out. You just focus on the elements connected to it.
I'll learn how to do that. If we want to recommend that, I can learn. I've learned so many new technologies since my slide rule days in high school.
But it's not my call if folks are more comfortable with the other way. I just think in terms of accuracy, clarity, like I appreciate it. And it's actually quicker. You just need to use the tools. I don't know.
Okay.
Then we have to edit out. I mean, some of these people we know, and they'll say, you know, they didn't get a good night's sleep last night because blah, 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 you know. Anyway, I'm fine with anything we want to do. And I do know how to use a slide rule.
I think we need to separate out like the process, which is the interview process. We're going to record and create a transcript for the purposes of getting the best possible record of what was said. That doesn't mean we're going to publish those verbatim, right? Like in their entirety, so that people's casual conversation in between answering questions is going to be, you know, recorded for all time. Those will be edited for content and everything else.
Appropriateness.
Yeah.
So I'll say the Cambridge folks have their public official interviews like shared on their charter review process page. And they have a few questions, I think it's 5. And the transcript is there. And I think it would be great if there are a few questions. It would be great if it's transcribed. It would be great as a part of this process if the raw data from these folks is out there beyond the report. But I don't know.
Okay.
In terms of moving forward, are we recommending things to the big committee?
Yeah.
Well,
that's what we're trying to come up with is recommendations for, they've asked us basically to address some of the questions that came up when Bernie came with his proposal. To give some shape and some specificity to this. A non-directed conversation. However, there are specific questions we want to get to, and then there's all these technical questions which we've been wrestling with, right? So if we're trying to get a transcript that could conceivably be published, we need to use technology. I don't think we can ask people to transcribe by hand while they're trying to do an interview. So I think what we're saying then is a Zoom interview or a recorded in-person conversation.
And we can ask follow-up questions, right? In other words, if there's set questions we ask everybody, we can follow it up with something wasn't clear, or right? Or do you have to just ask those questions and nothing else and just hear the answer?
I don't see why we couldn't ask follow-up questions. I just think that we're gonna the purpose of standardizing is to hear what everybody has to say about these same 5 or 10 things, right? And then shape a report or a section of the report from it. If going back for clarity, I think makes sense to me. I don't see why we would. Yeah.
I think for me, in terms of protocol and process, Meg, I think sometimes they're just some protocols that ask you to, perhaps you could ask people to say more or clarify, but the follow-up questions element is tricky. In terms of standardizing these. And not that it could be fully standardized, but for folks who want to sort of ask 15 other questions, like what does that mean for equity and process? Does that make sense? So if you're a talker
Yes, but
in this interview, you might keep people on for 2 hours asking more questions. But if we are just leaning into here are the standard questions, you want clarity and say more if you'd like. But I think like leading people in a lot of other directions could be tricky.
no, I mean clarity. Like if someone
Yeah.
says, well, I have mixed opinions about that. I've seen both sides.
Yeah.
And they stop talking. You might say, well, could you say a little more about what you see? Or
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Not-
So, but
yeah,
we are emphasizing here the value of standardizing them
yeah,
for equity and everything else. And the documentation is going to be recording followed by transcription, which we'll figure out somehow.
Yeah.
And then a process of sharing the cleaned up sort of transcript with interviewees for accuracy or any additional clarification.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
yep.
It does.
So what do we have left to do, Erica? Go over these questions?
We were gonna go over these questions a little bit. And so that we can bring them back to the larger group and say, this is what we're recommending is the standard process.
Okay. So we'll go over, so should we start in on the questions?
Sure. It is 8 o'clock.
Yeah, that's what I was
wanted
wondering
to-
about.
I wanted to ask if this is a piece of work we want to take on, and if we can't, if we just ran out of time, we just ran out of time, but I want to I think it's important that we came up with the standard,
Yeah,
some
me
answers to
too.
those standard questions.
I don't see how we can give this thoughtful attention without taking it more time than we all said we wanted to spend on this. I don't know what else to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And is it legal for us to send our comments to you, or edits or suggestions?
I think if you each individually send me some comments, I can compile them to share as our kind of assessment as a subcommittee.
Okay,
I think we can't have a whole email thread about it, but if you each individually send me
okay,
some notes on there's a set of questions for counselors, I will email them to you. So that
okay,
we're clearly
Great,
looking at the
thank
same
you.
thing. There's a set of
Great.
questions that Bernie prepared for counselors and a separate set for other town officials.
Right.
okay,
Yeah, I like
Great.
that.
Okay.
yeah, let's do that.
Do it that way. All right.
I'm gonna go eat some burnt Swiss chard.
Yeah, just before we adjourn, this, we don't have Athena here to confirm, but we have sort of roughly set up this rhythm where we're meeting on alternate Thursday evenings. Do we want to propose a date to her to make sure that it's okay for our next meeting as a subcommittee?
It's not 2 weeks from tonight?
Well, we can, that's what I'm saying is.
Yeah, that
wanna
sounds good
maintain
to me.
that. Do we want to maintain that rhythm for now?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
So
I like that
would
we
be
end at 8
February
too,
6th.
an hour. Good. The 20 what? 6?
February 6th,
6.
Yeah.
Right,
and 6:30 to 8,
good.
right?
Yep. And so maybe at
Yep.
the next meeting, I've realized I'm kind of curious about, we should give each other a little 3-sentence background of each of ourselves. I mean, Raphael, you said some things about what you've done in your work. I thought, I wonder what your work is. maybe we want to do that, but
We can do that. I'll put on agenda items,
yeah, or just
Belated-
brief, really
related
brief.
introductions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other agenda items that we want to make sure we get to. We'll have to revisit the idea of whatever happens next week in the large group. We'll have to revisit the idea of the survey consult that we
Right.
talked about.
We also talked about somebody designing a visual to be a part of this process.
That's
Like
right.
a logo, yeah.
Let me take this down, sorry, this document. I did want to say something about that I'm not sure. I don't know if this is a conflict of interest or not. My sister is a professional graphic designer, and I would love to
Oh.
ask her to contribute, but she's not in Amherst. But I wanted to ask Athena if she was present about conflict of interest and all of that. So I will ask her separately, but it's in my mind as a potential thing.
Nice.
That would be
Um,
great. I don't see any conflict of interest.
Well, I mean, she's my relative, and if, I don't know if the committee can outsource that to relations.
Yeah. It'd be good to check in.
Well, I
Yeah.
will check. I will check. What else? Survey consult, the design issue. If not this issue, this person, then some other person will have to source.
Yeah,
We did not get to budget, so we don't have good information to bring back for a budget request. So we'll have to revisit that at some point.
yeah. And I might have a follow-up on my list, an update, maybe. Hopefully. I'll keep working on the list,
The venue list.
the outreach list.
Okay,
But mostly trying to find out, who in the bid manages, just to get the email there, so when we're ready to send it, we know who to send it to.
Right.
And the Chamber of Commerce and so on.
and
Actually,
keep
I
in
know that
mind,
person.
just to circle back to that issue, keep in mind that all of those places that you're gonna reach out to, maybe not the neighbors lists, or the individual counselor lists, but the bid or the senior center, the survival center, whatever, are gonna have their own sort of social media platforms and
Right.
presence. That is another way that doesn't have to go email, but like. is a-
Right, I
you
meant,
know.
yeah, websites. But
Yeah.
I'll put it another way. Very good correction, Erica. I'll find out as much as I can. So when we're ready to send it, we know how to, not necessarily email it, but who to contact or how to get it on
Right.
their, like the Jones Library. I don't know what it takes to get, who's the person who does that weekly calendar thing?
Right. Okay,
Great.
if other ideas come up for agenda items, you'll reach out to me.
Thank you.
I
Excellent.
need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
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 Thank you. We're
Yeah.
adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Well, good night.
Thank
folks.
you.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank